produced by the site The Alabama Take. I'm the host, and my name's Blaine Duncan. You guys know me. With me today is a kind gentleman who may have the most impressive and varied resume of anyone who's blessed us with a visit. His name is Michael Cerveris. I didn't get that right.
We're so close. Cerveris.
Cerveris. Oh, I forgot the middle.
The middle one, yeah.
Cerveris.
What usually happens is Cerveris or Cerveris or Cerberus for the Greek aficionados in the audience.
But it's not Greek.
No,
it's
Italian. Actually, it was Cerverizzo when my grandfather came over.
Amazing.
When he got out of the American Army, apparently you could change your name easily when you were decommissioned. So he dropped the ZZO off and put an S on, thinking that it would make it real American. And what's done is
because
make
of the
people
consonant.
I guess so, yeah.
That was the idea, or leaving an O at the end would sound too Italian?
Yeah, I think that was the idea, because at that time, being an Italian immigrant was not always welcome every place. So he thought he would cloud the issue by, I think he thought it was like turning it into Jefferson or Washington.
I love that you have that Italian background. Well, you have been in at least 16 Broadway plays. Am I right about that number, 16? At the least?
Yeah, I guess Broadway probably only 11 or 12.
Okay.
But then a bunch of other off-Broadway ones too.
Okay. You've been nominated for a Tony Award 4 times and won 2 of those? Wow. Is that correct? My numbers right here.
I won 2. I've been nominated, I think, 6 times. So my average is actually not as good as you are making it.
Oh, come on.
I'll take the 500.
2 Tony Awards.
Yeah.
I love it. You've been on such television series as Fame, way back when, Fringe, Treme, Mindhunter. I got to get Mindhunter in there. It's a good one.
Yeah.
And even The Gilded Age, which is back on HBO or Max this past Sunday. If you're watching our episode on Friday, day of release, thank you, first of all. Michael's resume will leave you a little out of breath. For The Gilded Age, though, Michael, will Watson, your character, appear in this 3rd season?
No, I am very, very sad to have to tell you that Watson does not appear in this season. And I was crushed when I learned that was going to be the case. I know they were trying to cut costs a lot going into this season. There was some debate about whether they'd even do another season.
Yeah.
And it was coming out after the strike, the writers and actors strikes. They let everybody's contracts expire, and then they just rehired back the people that they wanted to for less than they'd been making before. And they got rid of some characters to try to streamline it. And I think there are fewer episodes. And I was always nervous because once Watson left the house, I realized they were going to have to spend additional time telling his story outside of the house, because if you're in the house, there's always a reason why Watson might be there. Okay? Once he'd left, you'd sort of have to devote more story time to his things, unless you tied him to another character in the show, which they could have done if they'd wanted to. Mm-hmm. He could have gone back into banking, and he could have bankrolled one of the other characters. He could have worked for Mr. Russell as a banker then.
Well.
So, I mean, I was really disappointed because, of course, I'm not objective at all, but I thought that was one of the most interesting storylines. Somebody who had been in society, had fallen from grace, had learned how to get a job and be in the serving class, and then suddenly going back into society again. It just seemed like there could be so many things you could explore with somebody who is from that class but now really knows what it's like to be in the other class.
I agree.
I think sadly the show isn't all that interested in the lower classes.
Yeah.
Its focus is pretty much on the wealthier people with a little sprinkling of the downstairs, but it's not like Downton was, I don't think.
No.
Yeah.
But yet, I came to know Michael from his singing and songwriting in his New Orleans-based band, Loose Cattle. I definitely want to get that in there. That's your touring musician on top of everything we've mentioned. Is it tough to work that in?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, I spend as much of my time just trying to manage my schedule, and of course they're both worlds where there's not a lot that's set in stone. It's rare when you get to know your schedule for weeks or months or years in advance. So you're always penciling things in and planning things. I'm in the middle now of trying to organize a tour that we're hoping to do in September, and basically middle of September to the end of September. And I'm doing it all. I have to plan it as though I'm positive that this is going to happen, but I know in the back of my mind that there's a chance that some crazy job that I can't pass up is going to, and then I have to like undo everything. And but I've done music as long as I've done acting, and somehow miraculously I managed to make a living as an actor. Being on TV and Broadway has been my day job to underwrite my acting, my musical.
Your music. If it's Mindhunter that gives you a call for season 3, there's that rumor that's floating now.
I know, man.
But it's just a rumor. We'll just treat it as what it is. I think it was Holt himself. Am I right about that? He mentioned it.
I think he did. I did hear something that sounded, because there have been rumors circulating ever since that season ended. It's been so frustrating. I've gotten to be on some really fantastic series, like Mindhunter in particular, and sign up for these things. You're usually given a contract that's for the next 5 to 6 years, and they have what your salary increases will be every year and how many episodes per year you're going to be in or paid for anyway. Every year they can decide to either not bring your character back or the series just won't come back. You're sort of like planning a future that may or may not actually happen. In a lot of these cases, it seems like, why in the world would you not make a third season of Mindhunter?
And the rumor now is 2 or 3 movies to kind of wrap up.
That's what I've heard, that they're not thinking so much of a series anymore and the film, which makes sense in terms of David Fincher's schedule. He doesn't have to put aside everything else he's doing. He can just do that. I think that was part of why the third season didn't happen, because we finished the second season thinking we were coming back in a few months to start the third. That's what we all thought was happening, including, I think, Fincher at that point. Then he had other things that he wanted to do, and the scheduling of those things got in the way. And for a while they talked about, could we do it without him directing? Because he wasn't directing every episode, but he was there, and he was in Pittsburgh all the time. And they realized, I think rightly so, that it wouldn't be the same thing if he wasn't there overseeing it the way he did. Making films seems like a more logical thing. And I'll see. The other thing I heard was that they might jump like 10 years or so, because the next sort of busy period for the actual historical guys was later when they went out west. My character wasn't one of the real figures. He was a combination of a few different people. He's based in DC, or he would be, in Virginia. We'll see if he makes it, if they even happen. But I'm with you. I've heard more convincing stuff lately than I had for the past few years.
It was one of my favorite shows.
Mine too.
Easily.
I watched it twice through before there was ever any thought that I might be on it, just because I liked it so much.
Right. That's so cool. A lot of people ask you about Yale. You are a Yale grad. But you want to know what one of my favorite things about your past?
What's that?
You have all these deserving accolades, and you're from West Virginia.
That's one of the things I am proudest of myself.
You're really?
Yeah.
What's the most West Virginian thing about you then?
It might be my stubbornness sometimes, and my conviction that I should figure out how to do it myself. And I certainly feel like the Appalachians. I feel my blood pressure go down. I feel my shoulders go down. So much more myself. And this kind of connects to New Orleans, where I am now and where I'm living most of the time. I grew up in West Virginia. I wasn't one of those kids who was like, I got to get out of this one-horse town. I was very happy there. And I don't know what I thought I would do with my life exactly, but I wasn't thinking I needed to leave there to do whatever it was.
Really?
And through a long, involved story, but I got the opportunity to go to this high school, Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire. I had, honestly, the only reason I ended up there was because they had a guy come to talk to our class about this school. He was from Huntington and had been there. They were suggesting it as a possibility for any of us. And we got to get out of a class to go listen to this lecture. And so his lecture ran over, and the next class that we were supposed to go to was a class I didn't want to go to, and my friends felt the same. So they said, if you want to stay and listen to the rest of the presentation, you can just skip some of the next class. And so we're like, yeah, definitely, we're very interested. And afterwards, the teacher knew that that's what we had done, and she dragged us to the vice principal's office instead, said these boys aren't interested in that school, they just wanted to skip my class, and which was true. But I of course said, oh no, I'm very interested, and please send some literature to my home about this school.
Wow.
So they did, and my parents misunderstood and thought that I was showing actual academic interest, and they encouraged me to apply to the place. And it was an amazing looking place, but I just never imagined in a million years that I would go someplace like that.
Talk about fake it till you make it.
Well, exactly, yeah. And I figured, we can't afford a place like that and everything else. But then I got in, possibly through some geographic distribution requirement that their admissions policy had. I don't know. But I ended up going there, and then went to school at Yale, and then went to New York. And so it was, and my family moved at a certain point sometime after that. My dad was a university professor, and so he was teaching at Marshall. That's why we were there. That's why I grew up there. He's from Pittsburgh originally, and my mom's from Western Massachusetts. My life just became in the Northeast for the most part, or traveling for work. I somehow just had never been back down below the Mason-Dixon since then, really. And then I got a job down here doing a film, and I decided to drive down because I had my dog with me. And so I drove south for the first time, and I hadn't really looked back once I left. I mean, I'd always been proud being from West Virginia, but I didn't think it was informing a lot of my life. The deeper I got down here, and the more I started to spend time in the South, and New Orleans is a whole different kind of South from West Virginia. Yeah. From Alabama, and most of the South doesn't consider West Virginia part of the South anyway, for a number of reasons.
Kind of, yeah.
It's kind of the bit that gets left out. The East Coast doesn't claim it. The Midwest doesn't claim it. It's just the weird bit left in the middle.
It is. Yeah.
Which I think is one of its greatest strengths and challenges at the same time. All of which to say, in a long roundabout answer to your question, it's I started thinking a lot about where who I am got established, and I started to realize that so much of who I am, despite growing up, most of my adult life has been not in West Virginia. Most of those formative years were all there, and so I think there are so many Southern attributes that I was raised with, and even though my parents weren't from there, but I was surrounded by it, I think I am much more a son of West Virginia, of Appalachia. I realized for a long time, and I've really embraced it in more recent years, and kind of become more proud of it and celebrated it more, and talked about it more.
Yeah. Your dad taught at Marshall. Are you a college football fan at all?
I am.
No way.
I've always been a Thundering Herd fan, just because I grew up with that, and we were there. In fact, we had just moved there. I guess we moved there in 68 or 69. But we were there when the plane crash happened, and I remember that night my parents were out at the movie theater seeing the movie, and we were home with a babysitter, and I remember the TV being on and seeing stuff about the crash, and somehow in my little kid's mind, being afraid that my parents were on the plane somehow just because they weren't home. And I was so relieved when they actually came home, but it was terrible. My dad knew some of the people on the plane, and the whole town was it was personal for everybody.
Yeah, I imagine.
I was always a Herd fan, and I love SEC football. There's nothing like it. I can cheer for various teams because it's kind of like the way I was in junior high and high school. I was never a total belonger. I wasn't a jock, but I played sports. I wasn't a brainy kid, but I did pretty well in school. Because I didn't belong to any one clique, I could always kind of move from one to another until they closed ranks when it was really the inner circle. And in the same way, I feel like I do that quietly, because you can start a lot of arguments by cheering for the wrong team at the wrong bar down here. But
yes, hopefully friendly arguments.
Yes,
but
yes,
yeah,
exactly.
You're right.
Yeah, but I love being around. I've spent a lot of time in Athens, and when George is playing, I just love the whole spirit of it, and the most positive. There's certainly a lot of negative aspects. I love big rivalries. I love, and college football is so much more fun than pro football anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Before we get in the heart of our show and the 4 questions, as a side hustle, I'm also an English teacher.
Oh yeah.
So I'm curious on what your favorite Shakespeare role is to play, or maybe you've never played it but wish you could.
That's a really good question. People have sometimes approached me about it, about playing Richard III. I think I bet that's a really fun, challenging character to play, because he's the villain, but he's also the main character that you're sort of seeing everything through, and he's so transparent about what he's doing, and yet he does it anyway. I do also really like Richard II. I think that one isn't done as often, and I think it's got some beautiful, beautiful speeches. I really like the later plays, the problem plays, the Pericles and Cymbeline, because I feel like at that point in Shakespeare's life, he was in his later years, and he's kind of looking back and borrowing threads from all of his other plays and kind of weaving them together. Cymbeline I did a production of, and then the end of that one, where everybody just all gathers together and everybody reveals their surprise things, and everybody finds out, oh, you're actually my brother, and oh, my lost mother is actually your queen, or whatever. Yeah. And it's just so dizzyingly, so many of those later plays are about reconciling differences and communities coming together, or families coming together, or getting past all of the ancient grudges that have happened. Romeo and Juliet is one of his earliest plays, and it's all about how it just ends in tragedy and there's no coming back from it. Hopefully we'll learn something. That's the most you can kind of hope for. And in the later plays, you actually see the learning from it and the actual steps towards making a better future. And I think maybe now more than ever might be a great time to look at those later plays for those kinds of things. Yeah,
they're more rare, but that seems to be a through line for you on social media and talking to you today, is a sense of community, a genteel way of approaching community. And you mentioned, don't say you're pulling for the wrong team, you don't want to start a fight, and it's just all of those seem to land on you being someone who thinks that maybe we need more community.
Oh, I think
in our communities.
Yeah, and I think that the truth is, we know that. I mean, we do it in our lives instinctively. I think we get a lot of people and a lot of power structures that have a vested interest in us thinking that we aren't on the same side, and we get fed a lot of stuff, whether it's through fear or anger or the suggestion that you're going to be deprived by somebody else's having something. So we get convinced that the people around us are enemies, or people we have to at least guard out for. It's kind of like what I was talking about with West Virginia. I remember growing up and seeing people be much happier having a lower standard local version of something rather than somebody coming in from outside who might actually have a better way of doing something, but there's just such suspicion because they're outsiders. And that's a very West Virginia thing. It comes from, I think, the settlers initially going up in the hollers, and the first people from outside that they saw were like tax revenuers and stuff, people trying to tell them what to do, and they were not really having that. So I think our instinct is to help each other and to take care of each other. And I think we're taught people are our enemies or are a threat to what we have.
Out of community almost.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I agree that does happen. I don't know that it's not gotten worse with the advent of social media, though. You use it for good, and we'll put some links in our show notes for people if they want to follow you, because you can keep them updated with Loose Cattle. Well, I'll also add a link for Loose Cattle, and you can keep them updated with whatever you've got going on. Great. The next Tony Award you get. Let's get into our 4 questions.
Okay.
The heart of the show here. People who've seen the short takes before know that we offer our guests 4 questions, and the last one's always the same for everyone. So our first question is, how do you know when you are being your authentic self?
I think it's hard for me to know in the moment sometimes. I think sometimes I know more retroactively looking back on a time.
Sure.
Because there are definitely times when I think I am being my authentic self, and I realize later you are not being your authentic self at all.
Is it harder because you do have a foot in acting, or that doesn't matter?
No, I think in a way that makes me even more critical. I mean, I've had ex-girlfriends who are like, I don't know if I can ever trust you because you're a good actor, so how will I know? And you're telling me the truth. It's like, people are acting around you all the time and just don't know it or acknowledge it. And I spent a lot of my life trying to tell the difference between being authentic and real. And I feel like in some ways it should be easier to tell whether I'm telling the truth or not. But I do think that because acting for me is a process of, you take what the writer's written and try to understand as clearly as you can, fully as you can, what they have created. And then you hold that up to your experience and the places where, okay, maybe I haven't murdered people and baked them into pies, but I have felt treated unfairly and wanted to have revenge. And so I can connect my personal life experience in some way with the character. And then the rest of it is just imagining yourself in the situation that the character's in and trying to understand. And also, I suppose, as you go through life, kind of taking note of how certain things feel. Like when an event happens, you are having that experience, but you're also, some part of you is also going, remember what this feels like when you're doing this, in case you ever have to portray it someplace.
Interesting.
So in some ways that can make you feel like you're not sure when you're being your authentic self, because you're always slightly monitoring what you're doing. The reality is that everybody does versions of that, or a lot of people do versions of that. They just don't notice it, or they don't file it away for use later. But if you've ever practiced a conversation you were going to have with somebody before you have it in your head when you're driving someplace, like, that's acting.
Wow. Yeah. That's also recommended if you've read the book Super Communicators by Charles Duhigg. He researches what is it that makes certain people you're drawn to them, you want to talk to them, that you always have a good conversation with them. Who are these people? What makes them special? And one of the things that he suggests in the book is that you can practice the conversation to know how it goes, and that way, if it does go off the rails, you've realized that in the moment, like you're talking about.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Funny too, that question of authenticity comes up. It comes up in my acting work, definitely, but it also has really come up for me in playing music, and partly because the music business and the music world has always been so concerned with authenticity and so wrong about it. So many of the people that were celebrated for being totally raw and real and stuff, and so who were in art school they weren't just working class guys. Roger, I guess, was, but and I think some of the Stones were in art college also. And most of the musicians and the people who are the least concerned with whether they're authentic or not are the people who are authentic. The people who are the most concerned about it are the ones who subconsciously or consciously know that they're not.
Consciously, in many cases, it's what I would suspect.
Yeah. So when I have always struggled with that because my father is such a, highly trained musician, and I had such an idea of who gets to call themselves musicians based on watching him. And I am mostly self-taught. I don't really read music. I, kind of figured out how to play guitar pretty much by myself and on my own. And so it's very easy for me to feel like a fake and like I'm pretending. And it's taken me a long time to be able to stand up on stage and sing. I can sing other people's songs easily and feel very honest and truthful doing it. But when it's something that I've written myself, I hide so much in it. For a while, I used to try to pretend that the songs that I wrote were actually written by somebody else so that I could invest in them without being shy about it. It's gotten better, but it's still, I don't think it's gone a lot of the time. I'm always just a couple steps away from feeling like somebody's going to pull the rug out from under me and say, okay, we know that you're not really who you're pretending to be.
It's just, vulnerability is just tough.
Yeah.
And you write songs and you present them. You don't just lock them up in the guitar case when you're finished.
Right. Or hand them to somebody else to sing. That's the essence of what any kind of artist or creative person, the challenge is that everything about trying to be that kind of person in the world requires you to have a thick skin to be able to survive. But the actual doing of the thing requires that you have almost no skin. And so trying to balance those things is the eternal challenge.
Yeah. Our second question, what is your most treasured memory?
I have such a hard time with most treasured, funniest, best, whatever, because I immediately think of 12 things and then none. I got to tell you, when you sent the email with these questions and stuff, I was like, I'm glad to have an idea beforehand, and yet it's probably been no help at all because all I've done is just worry about it and not come up with anything. So finally, I was just like, I'm just going to see what I say. I'll just see when I get there. But we have a number of really cherished memories. Some of them are as simple as I was working in Germany. When I did Tommy on Broadway, then I went to Germany and did it for ultimately like a year and a half and lived in Germany and traveled all around Europe. And but I would get these days, I'd have days off a lot, and I would drive to France for lunch and come back just because that's a thing you can do when you live in the middle of Germany. Yeah. But I used to take my dog for walks in this big field in the Taunus, which was like the kind of forest in the Taunus, which was like the kind of forest outside of, remind me of it. But it was probably, my dog at the time, Gibson, used to love just running into this field, and she would disappear completely, and then all of a sudden she would like pop up and jump up to kind of like look above the tops of the reeds and then go back down. And I have similar things with my dog now, Evangeline. Just like times that it's just the two of us out in nature someplace, and she is just living her best life, and that makes me happier than almost anything else, that kind of time. And I have lots of memories of those kinds of things. And then I was trying to think in terms of music or theater. There have been things like getting to sing on stage at the Ryman. That was a real watershed kind of moment for me. And I did a tour playing guitar for Bob Mould, who's this, the kids may not know.
Husker Du
and Sugar, and then his own solo stuff. And I was his guitar player on a tour of the U.S. and UK. And first of all, I just loved being in a band where somebody else put my amp on stage and somebody else said that was a thrill to me alone. But I remember standing on stage, and I loved that I was just the guitar player. I wasn't the front person. Everybody was really watching Bob most of the time, so I could do my thing. And I remember a mosh pit opening up in front of the stage, and just it seemed to just kind of happen by itself. But I knew that we were so loud, and I knew that what we were doing was making that happen, and it felt like some weird superpower.
Yeah, and magic.
Again, it's a communal kind of thing. It's like we all have our different jobs to do in this experience, but when we all do those things, it makes this moment, this magical thing happen. And those kinds of moments are the things that I hang on to.
Especially if you were able to recognize it in the moment, that there's that connection of what they're doing is part of what I'm doing and vice versa.
Yeah.
Here's our third question. You have that stellar resume. It's very varied, and it's also really cool. But what's missing from your life?
Oddly, this was the easiest one for me to
Okay. All right, let's hear it.
I have had opportunities to have relationships, and I've had great long-term relationships, but I've never been married. I don't have a partner now. And I know a big part of it is because I so prioritized work, and that includes like playing music or acting, but everything was always second to that. And I threw myself so fully into each project that I was working on that if I was in a relationship at the time, my girlfriends at the time would eventually feel second place to what I was doing, which was fair, because my only way I have known how to do it is to invest myself entirely in it. I know that it's a finite process. I know that eventually the show will be up and running, and then I won't need to focus on it 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Or it'll end, or the TV show will finish, or whatever. But it's a long time to ask people to wait sometimes. But the other thing, I think, is it took me way too long to figure out how to be a good boyfriend, a good partner. I thought I was great, but I can see now that I really was not. And I put people through a lot of insecurity and less consideration than I wish in hindsight that I had. I think I would be so much better at it now. And, now, of course, I can't find anybody.
There he is, ladies. He just said he's going to be great at it now.
Yeah. Now I have to actually live up to that. Yeah. But that's the thing. That I always assumed I would have a family. I have always felt like I wanted to be a father. I think that's why I've had these dogs that I've had. They have been the thing that I was caring for the most.
They're your children.
They're my children, yeah. I always assumed that I would be have a family and be up stuff, and
it could
not
very well
impossible.
be coming.
It could still happen, but
That's right.
but that's definitely the thing that is missing from my life, and I take full responsibility for why it is that way. But
yeah. Our fourth question is the same for every guest. It's the motto of the Alabama Take overall. Maybe it's just what's done up real good for you.
I kept coming up with all kinds of different things. Some of them were like great series, a great album, or whatever. But and I don't know if it's just like the time of year, but lately all I could think about was a really good peach cobbler. Is like
that's good.
I don't know that there's much that's better than that if it's really done up right.
Oh man, yeah, that sounds delicious. By the way, yeah. There is a place in Huntsville that serves only cobbler.
Really?
Variations, yeah, and I don't know that it's got high marks. It's only been open a few months.
I mean, their heart's in the right place. I'll say that for them.
That's a great answer. For our viewers, it's easy to find Loose Cattle online, but we will link you to them. They're pretty active on Threads and Instagram with personal accounts there.
Yeah, I do more Instagram. I think Kimberly, my co-band leader, maybe does a little more Threads than I do, but and it's always linked to Facebook, but I just sort of I ran out of bandwidth to do too many things, so I mostly just put it on Instagram and then it goes wherever it goes.
What we usually do is find the two most probably used, or where people can see the most about Loose Cattle or you the next time you have a movie or a show or a play that's going on. Yeah, we'll put those in the links. And Michael, it's been a pleasure getting to know you.
Oh, thanks.
I appreciate your time. You are a busy guy, as we talked about. So thanks for your time, man.
I was flattered to be asked. I mean, I feel like our band has a kind of Alabama connection with. Oh yeah. We're on Single Lock from Florence, and so we've been spending more time there, and things like that really matter a lot to me, like having connections with places and people. And so our Shoals connection has been something that's made me really happy.
Good for you. You mentioned penciling in dates probably in September for Loose Cattle. Do you have a sense of where those will be, the area?
Yeah, there are two kind of rounds we're going to do. The first one is as a trio with me and Kimberly, who's the co-band leader, and Rurik Noonan, who's from Atlanta originally and lives in New Orleans now. He's our fiddle player and our third vocalist. I'm going to play some shows in Atlanta and Macon and Mobile. And cool. And then we're heading back. We'll be in like Durham, Huntington, West Virginia, and culminating on Mountain Stage with the Baseball Project and Bob Mould.
Right.
So that's going to be a really fun thing. And that'll be ultimately like broadcasted on the Mountain Stage NPR show.
Yeah. I've heard of that. I hear that every year, and I always think how cool it probably is to be there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. And we've reached the end of our show, but doesn't have to be the end of your conversation with Michael and Loose Cattle. Go see them, check their links out, follow them, and you'll be set. Thank you.